In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
Let's imagine that there's a trinity that exists, that is the ground of reality. And let's call it body, mind, and soul. You might not believe that you have a soul, but let's just suppose that you do. You could think of it like the energy itself that everything is made of. It's the electrical impulses in your brain, and it's the energy that binds atoms together. It's like when this one slows down, it sort of condenses into these two. And together, these three things are like objects. And their existence creates another thing between them, and let's call this thing space. These are physical things, and these are ethereal things. And let's say that this space over here contains your emotions, and this one contains your thoughts. But this space down here at the bottom is a void. It's literally nothing. There's nothing there. It's empty. And you can envision nothing as darkness because there's no light. And you can also envision nothing as the simplest possible structure that exists in nature, which is a sphere. So this is a black sphere with nothing in it. And you were born out of it. Just like any animal or being, you were born out of a void, out of nowhere. And not only were you physically born out of a void in terms of a womb, but you were also born out of a void in terms of you don't remember anything before that. It's like being asleep. You came from out of nowhere. There's nothing to remember. And let's say that when you were born, you were sort of non-gendered. Sure, you might grow up to be a man or a woman, but at this point you don't know all of that. All you know is that you exist. So you were born from out of nowhere, but you were also born an orphan. And what does it mean to be an orphan? It really just means that you don't know who your real parents are. And the truth is, you don't know your parents when you're born. By the time you're old enough to know them, they're already different people. They've changed. You didn't know them when you were a kid. They've grown into being old, and you sort of wonder, what were they like when they were young, before everything happened to them? In that sense, we're all orphans. We develop an idea of our parents as these caregivers, but the truth is that we don't know them. We actually don't know if they're good or bad or what. We're sort of at their mercy. They could be hiding something from us. And not only were you born an orphan, but you were also born into a planet which has a limited amount of resources, meaning that you have to act in the world in order to survive. Clean water, food, a shelter from the elements, all these things need to be attended to if you're going to stay alive. So you're someone who doesn't really know their parents, and you live in something like a desert, a desolate place in terms of survival. Something sort of like Mars. It's like you're a moisture farmer. There's barely enough of the essentials of life to go around, so you have to squeeze every drop out of the air. And you're doing this because you're trying to get to harmony, because that's what every kid or being is trying to do. And let's say that this central area is harmony between all of these things that exist, where each one of these forces is equally distant and equally influential and equally understood. But this is you down here. And you're trying to get up there. And as a kid, you automatically sense that there's something between where you are and where you're trying to get to, which is harmony. You might say, I want to learn how to walk. Well, there's something in your way which is actually nothing. Your inability to walk is nothing. It's just a lack of something. And you have to go through that in order to learn how to walk. If the goal is learning to walk, then that's harmony. It's where you achieve the goal you set out for on a journey, and you gain the knowledge, and then it's yours. Once you have it, it becomes a part of you. You know how to walk. It becomes something automatic. Everything we do is like this. Whether you're learning how to walk or how to play the violin, you try it 1,000 times and fail. But once you succeed, it's yours. So you were born in this environment that is very barren. There's automatically the sensation that there's a problem in this physical system in the sense that you're periodically lacking something. You may have eaten some food this morning, but at some point you'll have to eat again, and you need to make sure that this is something that's relatively easy to do, since you have to do it every day. Luckily for you, there's another system you were born into that's man-made, that's out there in space around you. And this system is, ideally, something that was created to help you. Its purpose is to act like a buffer between people and nature, and also between each individual person within the system. And this system is a combination of two things. One is ethereal, and let's call it culture. And the other one is more solid and concrete. Let's call it government. We're all born into a system like this that is alien to us and that we have to learn about. The system has rules, and you have to learn the rules as you grow up. And as a kid, that's what you really want to do. You want to grow up. You want to get your driver's license. You want to graduate from high school. You want to get out into the world and begin your life as an adult. Becoming an adult means you have autonomy, and this leads to responsibility. And in our culture, a driver's license is a good symbol for that. It's like wanting to become a pilot, which is really just a way of getting off of your boring planet. You want to bring harmony somehow, and you see this lack of something as the problem. It's in your way. You learn about your culture and your government just by living, by being immersed in the world. You don't know anything outside of that, so if things are relatively harmonious, you might assume that this system is benign, or even helpful. But for some kids, there's an awakening. There's this realization that the system that was originally designed to help you has grown tyrannical. And it's grown tyrannical because people have let it fade into the past. Now, it wants to help you to death. It's taken on a life of its own, but it began as something like a cooperative, which in theory sounds like a good idea. Cooperation is good, right? This thing is a vast, structured organization that's run by rules which were written by people with the best intentions. It could take the form of a government, or a cultural belief, or a religion, or a bit of all three. But either way, it's like a machine, and it's constantly fading into the past. And because it's fading into the past, it's too ordered. And this means that it can't accommodate everyone. You have to have a certain temperament in order to tolerate it. This system tries to get you to take its shape, like it's the solid container and you're the fluid. And it wants you to take its shape for your own good. And this realization that the system has become a problem comes to you one day, unexpectedly. This realization takes the form of a message. It's a normal day like any other. You're going about your business on your moisture farm, and you get this message, seemingly out of nowhere. And it's like, suddenly, in an instant, everything's changed. You've discovered something new to you. And this is sort of like discovering your own mind. But more specifically, it's like a question in your mind that no one seems to have an answer for. And because no one around you has an answer, you start to think pretty highly of your mind. It's come up with something pretty unique. And it's weird that no one else around seems to be asking this question. So you must be pretty smart. So you start to treat your mind like a princess. You give it a halo or a crown for being so intelligent and idealistic. But why isn't it a prince, or a king or a queen? Why is it a princess? Well, it doesn't have any real power in the system around you. It's just a title, so it's not a king or a queen. And it's not a prince because, as far as you're concerned, your mind is where this new idea came from. And since all new beings come from women, let's make your mind a woman. So once you crown your mind a princess, you start to think you know everything. Everyone around you seems to be ignoring this problem that has suddenly become so obvious to you. And this makes you a little arrogant. After all, you're so young. You haven't even really lived life as an adult yet. And your youth has sheltered you from the world so much that the shelter itself is what enabled you to come up with this notion in the first place, that the system is a problem. And if you realize that, you realize that your mind itself is a prisoner of this thing that you want to rebel against. It's like when you realize what it means to be a princess. Being a princess means you were born into being a princess. You didn't earn it in any way. It's a title that was given to you. Your mind was born into being a princess at the highest heights of her culture. And it's like this princess turns around and sees that the government and culture that gave her her title has actually grown corrupt. And the corruption is obvious. but no one can agree on what to do about it. No one can agree on what to do or how to act. So your mind has been captured, and it sends out this message to you that goes something like, your only hope is to go outside of this system, out into the unknown. When you're exposed to this message, you're captivated. And you also recognize that because your mind's been captured by this system, you don't really know your mind. You've only seen a glimpse of it. And this glimpse of it has come to you from out of nowhere. It came to you because of this inner dialogue you have between these two voices in your head. And these two voices are basically just computational machines. One of them is as clear as day, and it's constantly telling you things, bombarding you with information. And the other one is more like an awareness. It's an awareness of the things that you know which are true. These two voices are built on the history of your civilization. All the ideas and concepts you've ever heard, and even your language itself comes from this history. The language you speak is like a form of technology that you inherit. You didn't come up with it. It's just given to you like a gift. And your language is a product of enormous stretches of time and massive amounts of calculations. So let's think of these two voices like robots. They're not real people. They're sort of subsets of what people are. One of these robots is an expert in protocol. It speaks your language. It's like a communication assistant. It's based on translating. But once you get to know this voice, you realize that it complains a lot. And it's pretty critical. It complains, it worries, it tells everyone things they already know, constantly. And it also wants you to think that it's the one to listen to. So let's make it gold like the sun. And because it sounds like you, let's give it a human-like shape that reflects that. But then there's the other robot, who's not like a person at all. It's like the gold one in the sense that it's a robot, but it doesn't speak your language. It speaks in a voiceless voice that has to be interpreted by the gold one. So just to differentiate between these two robots, let's make this one blue. And this little blue one is the part of your mind that wanders out into the unknown in search of some kind of old wisdom from the past, which lies outside the system you live under. It does this without your permission, like it's driven by some force that you don't understand, something that's just out of your reach. And it comes across this old wisdom out in the desert. But this old wisdom is just that. It's old, and most modern people consider it superstitious nonsense. It's based on this antiquated story of an archetypal battle of good versus evil. And most modern people that you know see the world in shades of gray, but the old masters of this ancient wisdom saw it as the light against the darkness. And they said that you were at the center of this battle. So once you hear from this old master out in the desert, you're resistant. It's a lot to take in, this ancient tale of good versus evil and your place within it. You try to go back to your old life on the farm, but once you're exposed to this message, it changes you. You don't see things the same way anymore. Your old life is gone. There's nothing to go home to. And you realize that you don't have a choice if you ever want to live in harmony. So the old master says, you must rescue your mind from the prison of your culture. And you have no choice but to go. So you join forces with this old master. But there's still a problem because while you might be an okay pilot, you're young, inexperienced. You really don't know anything about life outside of your little bubble. All you know is that you need a way to get to your mind. And all you really have is a message. It's not a physical thing, it's just a message. So the only thing you can do is get to a physical thing, which can get you where you need to go, which is like a body that can travel through space. And the nature of your journey means that you'll also require someone to pilot that body who's experienced enough to get around this tyrannical system that's in place. Someone who's willing to take risks. People like that tend to try to stay under the radar because they don't follow the rules. By the system's standards, they're criminals. So to find this person, you'd have to be someplace where criminals hang out. You'd need to be cautious because chances are this person will be a materialist. Someone who's only out for themselves. They might be willing to kill people, What you really want is a rebel without a cause, someone whose cause might only be money, and you can give it to them, and join your two causes into one. Because this person is a criminal, and statistically speaking, most criminals tend to be men, let's make this person a man. And he's a man who has the capacity to be dangerous. You might be tempted to worry about this, but if you've got the voice of the old wisdom with you, maybe they'll balance each other out. So let's call this one the renegade. And just like your mind has two sidekicks in the form of these robots, this renegade has two sidekicks too. And one of them is an animal. I mean, literally. He hardly even speaks a language. He's this lumbering animal-like creature. And despite their differences, this animal and the renegade make a pretty good team. In fact, the renegade can't pilot the ship without him. And the renegade seems to understand this creature's indecipherable language perfectly. In some ways, this animal is more dangerous than the renegade. And he's also a little emotional. He occasionally gets scared, and his buddy has to bring him back into line. Basically, he's your emotions. It's an ancient part of you that you inherited from your animal ancestors. It communicates with barks and growls, and you have to learn the language it's speaking. And then the renegade's other sidekick is his ship, which is kind of like the robots. It's a technological device that's built on the history of their civilization. It's built on knowledge of physics and knowledge of mechanics. It's like an array of history and knowledge that's condensed down into something physical that has a purpose. It's not alive, but it's a body that he can get around in. Not unlike our own bodies in terms of, you didn't figure out how to make a beating heart, but evolution did for you, and that's a process of knowledge built upon knowledge built upon knowledge. Your genetic structure is like the blueprint that builds the vehicle that you'll travel in, like a ship that travels through space. So you've got all these beings together in this body, and what do? You want to get to harmony, but you realize that you can't do that until you get this out of your way. This needs to go away, this dark sphere of nothingness. And there's someone down there at the heart of this emptiness. It's like an evil overlord who both embodies and defends what has happened to the system that has become a tyranny. And it wants you to fail in your mission to rescue your mind. It's rigid and ordered and consumed with control. It's like this being has become part machine. But it started out like the old master, within this sacred group. If this sacred group existed, what would they be like? They'd be balanced, harmonious. They'd also know the shared story that we all have in common, so they'd be able to see down into the fabric of reality itself. And to the untrained, they'd appear to perform miracles. Because they're truly balanced, they'd have mastery over both their body and their mind. And they'd understand malevolence, the shadow self. They would understand its seductive nature, and they'd integrate it. And because they'd understand malevolence, they'd also know that they need to be trained to defend themselves. But ideally, their best and most effective weapon would be a weapon made of light. It's not unlike a flashlight in the sense that you can go into a dark room with a flashlight and suddenly it's illuminated. Suddenly you can see what's there and you realize that the darkness is nothing. It's just an absence of light. And that's what their weapon does. You point it at something that is corrupt or malevolent and it just disintegrates it. It cuts through darkness, and all it is light. To wield a weapon like that, you'd need discipline. You'd need to be calm, confident, like a balanced sage warrior, able to speak poetically on any subject, and yet be deadly in terms of self-defense. This is a necessity once you're aware of the true reality of things. You need a weapon like that, because you know that when there's a light shining in any direction, it's going to create a dark shadow behind you. Everybody knows this. If there's a star out in space, and you put a planet there, there's a light side and a dark side. It's as natural as you could get. It's so fundamental, we don't even think about it. And that's actually the story that these old masters are telling. Yes, in the light, you put any object in there and there's a dark side to it. And that includes you. So we've got you, who's this inexperienced kid, taking a journey with these two robots, an old religious hermit, and a renegade. And he's got his emotional sidekick and his ship to get you to your mind. But once you get there, you realize it's too late. That world is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And in its place, you find this spherical machine of darkness. Despite the fact that it seems like you're doomed, you decide you're going to find your mind and escape. But how do you do that? How do you escape the prison of your mind once it has you? The truth is, you already have everything you need. You just need to act. That's the only thing that's missing. The problem is that sometimes it requires a pretty big leap of faith. But if you can bring all these aspects of yourself into alignment and take a chance, you'll actually succeed. So you rescue your mind and swing across this void together to the safety of the ship where you can escape. And once you escape, you're like the old masters. You're following in their footsteps. It's like now you can hear the old wisdom in the back of your mind, helping to guide you to where you need to go. And then just beyond this giant red world, you arrive at your new lush and green home base. It's like this new foundation that's full of life. And this new foundation is built on something which actually isn't new. It's actually like an ancient ruin built thousands of years ago. But it's something sturdy enough to have survived the eons of time. And there's still a problem. Because you've escaped, now the system knows about you. And you risk everything again because you know that if you don't, everything you love about this newfound harmony will be destroyed anyway. So you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by taking the risk. In a sense, you already made the choice. You made the choice when you left your farm and chased that little blue robot out into the unknown. So then the only thing left to do is go out and conquer the darkness. You've got your mind, which has been freed from the prison of your government and your culture, and you've got the voice of the old wisdom from the past speaking to you. It's like letting go of your thoughts and just knowing when the time is right. If you wait for it, you'll just know. And when that happens, the last second your body and your emotions will snap into alignment and give you the signal that now is the time. You're inspired to act. Every one of us has the plans within us. You're actually carrying them right now. But sometimes you just need a little nudge, a reminder of what we're all doing here. We're riding this balance. But now it's like we're stumbling around, arguing about what the story is. Maybe there's some old wisdom from the past that's still useful, that we've forgotten about. Could be something we've missed. Something that is so obvious that we've overlooked it. It could be that there's a void out there that has obscured part of the picture. Maybe there's just one piece of the puzzle missing, but it's a fundamental piece. When you learn something new that is fundamental, the whole world looks different. When you know the meaning, it changes everything.